With each overworked start and net, the Flames scoring woes are starting to shake confidence, and it's happening at a pace that I could see burying this team's playoff chances.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Locked On Flames, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. The offensive woes starting to produce a lack of confidence for the Calgary Flames, especially as Dustin Wolf makes an 8th consecutive start and a loss at Boston on Thursday. We'll look at what went right and what went wrong and get a quick glance into Saturday's third game in basically 3.5 days for the Flames against the red-hot Pittsburgh Penguins. And will Blake Coleman be part of it? We'll have an update on what's going on with the outstanding forward for the Flames. My name is Ryan G. I am a lifelong play-by-play broadcaster based in the Pacific Northwest, and I've been a Flames fan for at least 20 years since Peter Maher, the legendary Hall of Fame broadcaster, brought me into the fold during the 2004 Stanley Cup run. The Flames have lost 4 in a row. They fall to the Boston Bruins in a tough outing at TD Garden. 4-1 the final score. I felt like Sportsnet's Kelly Rudy said it perfectly right. So close. That feels like the theme of this year's Flames team, is they're just so close to being a quality team. And at this point, with a 4th straight loss, it feels like they're so close to being atop the draft, because nothing has gone right for this team. Connor Zary gets the only tally for Calgary. It was in the second period, but there were just too many shots from opponents in the last 3 games. Dustin Wolf makes an 8th consecutive start. Reason for that is because Devin Cooley is still battling illness, according to the Sportsnet broadcast. And 8 straight starts is hard enough. Having goalies play back-to-back games, Dustin Wolf, we'll hear from him in just a bit, that's not part of the plan, right? They don't have goalies play back-to-back games, but still there's so many shots coming the way of Dustin Wolf that it's got to be difficult, even in the toughest of circumstances, to give his team a chance. And we felt it yesterday for the Flames in that 4-1 loss. In the month of December, when Wolf won all but 3 of his 10 starts, he faced more than 30 shots just twice. And that was both against Edmonton on the road and then back at Scotiabank Saddledome. So far in January, he's faced 30 shots in 3 of the 4 games. And against Seattle, there were 27 shots, and that was still more than he saw in a game other than the Edmonton matchups since Buffalo put 29 toward the net in Calgary's 7-4 win. So I can't tell you with certainty, but it feels like there is a puck control issue somewhere in here. And Ryan Huska, Connor Zary talked about it with NHL Flames on X.
Coming out there with an attitude that we have to grind it out. I think finding chemistry within our lines and finding things to do that you can work off and build confidence off, and little plays and little details that we can do. And like you said, when you got a team with fresh legs, you kind of try and got to do whatever you can to dig deep and grind them down.
You know, sometimes it's just you can look at the stat sheet and be able to tell who you're looking for more out of. But I did see it from a lot of our players here tonight. I thought our back end did a pretty good job for us tonight, and I thought they did as much as possible. They moved the puck quick, and as I said, the plays that they made coming out of our own zone allowed us to have some opportunities that we just weren't able to capitalize.
Connor Zary and then Ryan Huska in those clips, and Coach Huska says he thought the back end did a good job of getting the puck moving, but there were a lot of rebounds, again, that gave the Bruins a second chance at the net. And then the discussion out of those 2 sound clips just feels like there's some offensive uncertainty with the way that Calgary is playing heading toward net. Night to night offensively, it's starting to kind of take over the mind of the Flames. It sounds like confidence is waning in those clips. rightfully so. They've lost 4 straight games. They've been limited to 1 goal or less since the 8-game losing streak in October. It's the first time since that streak that the Flames have been limited to just 1 goal or less in 3 straight games. Just at a glance, anyway, looking through the schedule. So you have another slow start. It felt like Calgary never really established their own offensive zone possession. And Boston got up really early in shots, 5-1, and that didn't really even out until around the time that the teams went 4-on-4 between a Bruins brief power play and the Flames getting about 26 seconds on their first power play. We'll talk more about that in our second segment when we discuss some of the things that went right. But the Flames felt slower than their opponent for the second consecutive night in that opening period. And the road trips can get sluggish, but we're on the front end of the road trip. And so Montreal looked really fast, very young team. Boston's a team that Calgary just beat a few weeks ago in Scotiabank Saddledome, and yet Boston looked like the dominant team on Thursday night. I had a great line in my game notes, just a big ugh at about 8:43 on the clock in the first period. Joel Farabee can't get it cleanly on a great crosser, but it was there. And I wish that more Flames forwards could handle the puck cleanly on great passes. There were other moments like that where you saw a chance for a guy to make a great play. I noticed there were a lot of good looks at times for Calgary in that first period, but they did not capitalize. And Dustin Wolf has to be absolutely exhausted and doing his best to try to be a trooper, as he talked to NHL Flames on X along with Connor Zary as well.
You got behind the 8 ball to start with again. I mean, you give up the first goal, you chase the game a little.
I'm just doing what I can to try to help the team win. I've made a couple mistakes over the last couple of games that have ended up in the back of our net, and it can be frustrating because you want to be perfect in a sense to, you're playing for your teammates and you're trying to keep as many pucks out of your net, but I'll try to do my best, and a couple errors have cost me in a couple areas.
It's not ideal, and it's not our intention to play him 3 of our last 4, but sometimes situations arise, and I thought he handled himself very well. He always gives us a chance, and I thought he competed and battled very hard.
That's kind of the takeaway is as tough as these last 2 games, the first 2 games of the road trip have been, Dustin Wolf has not been a dark spot. Definitely doing the best that he can in those situations. Even on that first goal by Sean Corrali, was played off the boards. Hanley was there, but a little bit late getting over. And it seems like Wolf is protecting the right side of the net on that game, on that play rather. And that is starting to look like the best way to beat Dustin Wolf is his anticipation is so good to slide over that even on Montreal's over the shoulder goal, and then this one to open up the scoring for Boston, he's anticipating a pass, and instead the shot goes straight toward the goal and gets in there. Again, could be fighting fatigue after 8 straight starts to even in that first intermission on Sportsnet, they said that those 8 straight starts were not the plan, but you have Devin Cooley still battling illness. Pat Steinberg on X says Dustin Wolf making his 8th straight start tonight in Boston. Devin Cooley remains ill and still not 100%. That's Fan 960 Steinberg on X. And it's the first time Wolf has allowed 4 or more goals in 3 straight games since late November, early December last season. And in that stretch, Calgary went 0-3 at Ottawa, at Columbus, and at Dallas. And so I'm not terribly surprised by the results. I think the most dangerous part of this stretch of play for Calgary is that because Dustin Wolf is allowing more goals than a Wolf outing normally would, Calgary's poor offense isn't able to keep up. And it now starts to feel like the confidence is waning with some line changes each and every night, moving lines around, moving pairings around, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of a 4-game losing streak, which is often enough to start to have some of those confidence moments, confidence lacking moments, I should say. What went right and what went wrong? We'll open up with what went wrong in Thursday's defeat against the Boston Bruins. That's when this episode of Locked On Flames rolls on. There is nothing like being near the ice during hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere, it is unmatched. Watching at home is great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually getting tickets. Long queues, endless screens, price changing at checkout. That is why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I used the Game Time app earlier in the fall. This thing is wonderful. You open it up, and it's amazing how quickly you can see the great seats that are available to you. And one of my favorite pieces is they have zone deals. They are super clutch. You choose what section you want to sit in. Game Time picks the seats, and you save even more. There's NHL tickets available for as low as $25. It makes it super easy to plan a game night. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Flames your first listen of every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, I invite you to check out the Everydayer Club. It is new, and it is rocking right now. You can get in there for ad-free audio of Locked On Flames. It's compatible with your favorite Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other podcasting app, and there's an invitation waiting for you to get to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat for listeners of this show. Please check it out. Go to lockedonflames.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Calgary loses against the Boston Bruins 4-1 on Thursday night. What went wrong in this defeat to a team that wasn't having a great stretch of play, just 3 wins in the last 10 games for Boston going into that one? But one of the things that Calgary couldn't take advantage of was Boston's propensity for putting teams on the power play. Didn't happen. Boston was staying out of the penalty box 207 minutes in the box in the last 10 games of the season going into the game against Calgary. And instead, Calgary just had 2 power play chances. And that's somewhat deceiving because the first sequence was when Calgary had about 26 of power play time, 26 seconds of power play time coming out of that first penalty where Calgary was charged. I want to say it was Michael Backlund. And then there was a penalty 26 seconds into the Boston power play that evened things, and Calgary got the benefit on the back end. But shots were in Boston's favor. Calgary oftentimes, even in defeats, has led in shots put on net. And then high scoring, or rather high danger chances. Boston 15-9, 35-20 in scoring chances overall for the Boston Bruins. So Calgary definitely did not get the most out of what Boston's tendencies are, and credit the Bruins for playing a better game to get in that situation. Some of the things that went right for Calgary in that matchup, they definitely had some better power play moments, didn't score on the power play, but Coronato, pretty stellar game for Matt, and the Flames started to turn the tide in the 4-on-4 stretch in the early second period. I marked it down as a turning point, and I don't think I was alone in that. We'll hear from Connor Zary in just a moment about how that second period started to open up some possibilities. And Connor Zary is someone who stands out as another thing that went right. First game that Coronato and Connor Zary had at least 3 shots each since November 22nd against Dallas. It was all the way back to November 11th against San Jose. Before that, I liked the play from Coronato and Zary, and I focus on them a lot because the whole premise of going after the bottom of the standings to get the best possible pick in the entry draft and seg yourself a McKenna or any of the other best picks that are up there in the top 3. Certainly, maybe not trying to continue this potential rebuild for Calgary out of the murky middle, as I've seen it called on the internet quite a bit since doing this show. If you don't want to build that way, then you're basically saying you don't want to build with the likes of Connor Zary or Matt Coronato, because those are the kind of picks that the Calgary Flames have had in recent drafts back to 2020 and 2021. And I have been pretty hard on Coronato. And as I was looking at the last time that Zary and Coronato had the kind of game that they did on Thursday against the Bruins, I did notice that Coronato had an 8-game streak with at least 3 shots in the middle part of November. And I didn't give a ton of credit for Coronato being so aggressive. And I think that's part of the reason that he led the Flames in scoring early on in the season. But Thursday was Zary's first 4-shot game of the year. And when the offense isn't producing, which has been the case all year for the Calgary Flames, I feel like you need to start having guys take some chances that maybe they're not otherwise taking. And I'm hoping that Thursday's production from Connor Zary, again, taking 4 shots, is going to spark him to be more aggressive over the course of the rest of this homestand or rest of this road trip, certainly, but pretty much for the rest of the year. It's kind of like the idea of just unloading what you have left for the rest of the season at this point, because what do you got to lose, especially if Calgary becomes a seller, which after 4 straight losses and falling so far behind 500, being 6 points out of the playoff race, I'm having a hard time imagining that you're not going to see a good amount of selling. It's just a matter of when and not as much if Calgary is. Are they going to wait till closer to the trade deadline, or are they going to find a way to start letting some folks go in January? Igor Sharangovich, how about 400th game for him? 56 goals, 105 points in his Flames career. Was traded back in 2023 from the Devils when Tyler Toffoli went over to New Jersey. And it's been a pretty milestone season for Sharangovich too, as he picked up his 200th NHL point and his 100th assist so far in this 2025-26 season. So power play had some brighter spots, but you still don't convert, still 0 for 2. And more importantly, a 4-1 loss to Boston. Calgary has to turn it around and get ready for the Pittsburgh Penguins coming up on Saturday. Winners of 6 games in a row. And how will Blake Coleman, what will his availability, what will his ability to play if he's on the ice? We'll talk about that on the other side of this edition of Locked On Flames. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get into the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel gives users a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum or defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boost gives you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Calgary rounds out the opening week of this road trip against the Pittsburgh Penguins on Saturday. Will the Flames have Blake Coleman? Official status, according to ESPN, as of January 8th, Blake Coleman is day-to-day. It sounds like that vibes with the way that Ryan Huska is talking about Blake, basically saying it's being a little bit more cautious than anything. And so it appears that Blake Coleman will likely be in the lineup against the Penguins. Zayne Parekh is still listed as out, didn't play the first 2 games of this road trip after being returned from the loan that sent him over to World Juniors, where he put up that stellar performance, the most points from a Canadian defenseman in the World Juniors. And it would be nice to get Parekh back out there and see how the defensive pairings may continue to look even in a post Rasmus Andersson space. But at the same time, you haven't really gotten a good look at Zayne Parekh this year in a Flames uniform, even prior to his loan out to World Juniors because of health as well. The other possibility, granted, it's not likely to happen on Friday or Saturday, is there's a report from thescore.com referencing TSN's Pierre Lebrun on Thursday's early trading segment, talking about Coleman possibly being a candidate for the Montreal Canadiens. In a lot of ways, that kind of makes sense to me after watching Montreal and Calgary's game on Wednesday and highlighting on the show how much the youth movement has sprung Montreal forward, how fast they played against the Flames, and their own general manager claiming that the Canadiens' rebuild is ahead of schedule. You add a 2-time Stanley Cup champion to that team in a season where Blake Coleman's playing good hockey, leading the Flames in scoring. It does make sense. The report says Coleman signed through next season at $4.9 million for a cap hit and has a 10-team approved trade list. I didn't see if there was an elaboration on who those 10 teams are. I imagine that's not public knowledge, but I don't know that for sure. And so Calgary could see Blake Coleman continuing to be swirled around trade rumors as much as Rasmus Andersson has been. And that's another reason that I'm excited to see Zayne Parekh get back into the fold, is what those defensive pairings will look like potentially after Rasmus Andersson is dealt. Blake Coleman has certainly been on that list of possible dealt Flames as much as Nazem Kadri has been as well. But Blake Coleman's stock is probably the highest out of the 3 of those right now. Rasmus Andersson's reputation continues to be one that will continue to carry value for a potential Andersson trade. However, his red-hot start to the season has kind of waned as of late. I don't think it's enough to, by any means, have people not consider bringing Rasmus Andersson into the fold. Even the Boston Bruins broadcasters, who I listened to in the first and third period of Thursday's game, couldn't stop talking about Rasmus Andersson. A Locked On Bruins has also talked a lot about getting Rasmus Andersson in the past. So maybe that's a potential trade destination too, if the Bruins take this recent stretch where they were down and maybe use the Flames win as a springboard to kind of craft themselves back into the postseason picture. Right now, Boston enters play on Friday, 2 games out of the final wild card. The Sabres hold that spot with 50 points. Bruins at 44 games played. Buffalo only at 42 so far. So something worth mentioning. Pittsburgh, 6 wins in a row for the Penguins. They're 21, 12, and 9, and they're on a 10-6-5 mark at home. They're good at scoring, and when they do put up 3 goals or more, they're 21-4-4. It feels like a really difficult time for Calgary to have to play, especially if Dustin Wolf is in net again. Calgary does not have a game on Friday, but this is a 1:30 Mountain Time face-off in Pittsburgh, and so it's not a significant amount of time off for Calgary. The flight from Montreal to Boston is about 90 minutes or so. They got into Boston about early afternoon on Thursday, had to play that game a few hours later, and then Calgary likely gets to Pittsburgh on Friday and then plays that game middle of the day on Saturday. 18-22-4 overall for Calgary, but 6-15-2 on the road. They've just not been good at home, or on the road, beg your pardon. You have 16 goals, 20 assists for Bryan Rust, leading the way for the Penguins. Sidney Crosby, 5 goals, 9 assists over the last 10 games. The Penguins are 7-3-0 in those games, and basically scoring a full goal more per game than the Calgary Flames. The offensive output is there for the Penguins. I'm a little bit worried about this game, especially considering the results have been so distant in the last 3 games for Calgary, especially. You lose to the Predators. That was a closer game, but Seattle dominated Calgary, and everything is happening in bunches right now in the Calgary Flames losing streak. Boston scored fairly close together on Thursday. Montreal had that cluster of 3 goals in the second period. I want to say it was in like an 8-minute span or so. The first one went in at 3:10. The next last one at 8:12. Yeah, 5-minute span in that second period against Montreal. And then Boston put up a barrage in the second period as well. Only 1 goal scored by Calgary. The offensive woes are concerning, and Pittsburgh doesn't seem like a get-right game. My hope is that when we talk again on Monday, or recapping a Pittsburgh-Calgary game, which we will do, that Calgary finds a way to get a win, or certainly feel like they're churning the tide going into the potentially most winnable games of this 5-game road trip anyway, against Columbus and Chicago. Next week, we'll also explore some trades that are on the horizon for the Flames. Calgary could get serious about dealing players with about 10 games before the Olympic break. Would be probably a good time to maybe maximize trade value. We'll discuss that next week on Locked On Flames. Thank you so much for being here. We invite you to subscribe and follow the Locked On Flames so you get all of the latest episodes. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. You can get Locked On Flames ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. I see a lot of y'all in the YouTube comments. Thank you so much for doing that. Maybe head on over to lockedonflames.supercast.com and join the club so you can enjoy this show ad-free on audio. For those of you on video, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL.